Hello, and welcome to Eat to Treat. We are a nonprofit that aims to end health disparities, and I'm Dr. Amaris Williams, and I do live cook along cooking demonstrations. I have a PhD in nutrition, and I'm an avid foodie and a cook. And we do diabetes friendly and hypertension friendly cooking demonstrations every first and third Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And it's cook along. So I post the ingredients on the website eat-to-treat.org ahead of time. And everyone can join me in the kitchen to cook together this delicious meal. So today we're doing a pesto stir fry. And it's gonna be delicious. It's gonna be fresh and vibrant and green. And let's just get started. The first thing is we're gonna start cooking our carbohydrate base for our stir fry, which is gonna be for me quinoa, but you can also do brown rice if you're more comfortable with that. Um, so all I'm gonna do is take a cup. This is just white quinoa, and I picked white because it cooks faster than the other colors of quinoa. There's no real difference between them. It's not like the difference between white rice and brown rice where white rice and is a whole version of brown rice, and brown rice is the whole grain and is more healthier for you. Um, Quinoa is all they don't hull quinoa, so um, white quinoa is just quinoa with a white hull, so the hull is still on it. Though quinoa is not a grain, it is a seed. So I've got my cup of quinoa. So a lot of people will say quinoa is a grain, but it's actually a seed. But it still has a lot of fiber and carbohydrates like a grain would have, and it's also has oh, I'm dripping. It also has a lot of nutrients in it, like a whole grain would have. So there are some similarities, but quinoa is technically not a grain, it's a seed. All right, so I'm gonna put 2 cups of low sodium chicken broth in with the quinoa. If I were going to cover this, I would put 1 3/4 cup, but because I'm not gonna cover it, I'm just gonna put 2 cups, and the extra quarter cup is gonna be there for evaporation, to count for evaporation. All right, so that's 2 cups of broth with 1 cup of quinoa. And save the broth. We're going to be using that again later. And I'm just gonna turn it on. I'm gonna turn it on high to start, and then I'll turn it on 8 out of 10 to start, and I'll turn it down once it starts to boil. Oh, and we need a quarter cup of salt. Not quarter cup. Oh my gosh, that's a lot. A quarter teaspoon of salt to put in there. Because when I made this before, I made it with just the broth, and the broth does have salt in it, but it still needed a little bit more salt. So, a quarter teaspoon of salt, and it'll be ready to accept the stir fry. All right, next up, let's start getting the stir fry done. For that, I'm going to put about a teaspoon of oil, not a teaspoon, a tablespoon of oil. I'm just getting all my units mixed up today. A tablespoon of oil in the pan. And then I'm going to start with the onions. Now, if you're using a regular onion, you just cut it up and throw it in the pan. If you're using scallions like I'm using with a bunch of scallions, you normally get about 6 scallions, and that's what I've got here is 6 scallions, or green onions, depending on where you're from. You say it differently. I'm from Georgia, so I say scallion. So I'm just gonna take the white parts of the scallions, and I'm going to cook that. The green parts I'm going to save for later. That's going to be the garnish. So for right now, I'm just going to cut the white parts off and save the green parts for later. And then I'm just going to cut the roots off because it's just not attractive in the food. And then I'll just slice the scallions. All right. So I'm doing relatively small pieces. Onion is not my favorite flavor, so I'm not going to have big chunks of. I mean, I like the flavor of onions and it lends to whatever you're cooking in, but it's not, you know, a dominant flavor that I want on my palate. So I'm going to cut into relatively small pieces. All right, looks like my quinoa is boiling already, so I'm going to turn it down to a 5. I'll see if that's low enough. All right, and I'm going to turn my big pan on. I'm going to turn that also on high, probably about a 7, 7.5 out of 10. Spread the oil around a little bit. Stir fry, we do it with a small amount of fat at high heat. So definitely going to start at a 7 out of 10. 7.5 out of 10. All right, the next thing that's going in there for me, I'm going to demo all the vegetables except for the cherry tomatoes, and I've turned my quinoa down to 4 because 5 is a little bit too much. So, the next thing I'm going to put in the pot is the sweet potato, because I want that to be more cooked than everything else. So I'm just going to peel it roughly. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just get most of the peel off. And then I'm going to cube it. I'm going to cut it into small cubes. Because if you cut it into too big pieces, it's going to take too long to cook. And I turn my pan down to 6.5. All right. So for the sweet potato, to get it into cubes, you cut a flat surface on one side so that it doesn't roll around on you. And then cut planks, like 1/4-inch thick planks, out of your sweet potato. And I turn my pan down to a 5 out of 10. I'll turn it back up once I get the sweet potatoes in there. Then you can take your planks and turn them on their side and cut little sticks, 1/4-inch sticks. And then once you get your sticks, you turn those sideways, and then you can cut your cubes. So these are the sticks that I'm talking about, and I'm just going to cut them a couple of times to turn them into cubes. Okay, and sweet potatoes are not a traditional ingredient in a stir fry, but I think that they come out really good when you do add them in there. Okay, the next thing I'm going to put in there is a bell pepper. And you've seen me cut bell peppers 1,000 times. They are boxes, hollow boxes with seeds kind of suspended in the middle. So all we're going to do is cut the sides of the box off. So cutting down the side like this, and then turn it, cut down the side again, but not with your finger in the way. And then keep doing that until you cut all the sides off. Alright, and so now I've got my, this has got some green stuff in the middle, but the seeds are suspended in the middle of the box. And for this, I'm going to cut strips of bell pepper. And I'm just going to check on my quinoa here. It looks like it's almost absorbed all of the liquid. Give it a little stir. Alright, and then keep cutting your bell pepper and throw it in there as you cut it. The next ingredient I'm going to put in are carrots. So again, I'm just going to quickly peel them. You may not be using as many vegetables as I'm using. I believe I said pick 5 or 6 vegetables, and I'm using all the ones that I recommended. You could even pick vegetables that I didn't recommend, like for example mushrooms. Mushrooms are good in stir fries. But I forgot to put that on the list, even though I have mushrooms that I could put in mine. Don't forget to stir your vegetables on occasion. So it's been long enough that I'm going to stir mine again. And sweet potatoes, I like using sweet potatoes in stir fries because they have sugar in them that caramelizes. And so you get a little bit of caramelization flavor in your stir fry when you use sweet potatoes. Alright, and so I'm just going to chop up my carrots, cut the tips off first. Nothing fancy, just straight up cut the carrots into little rounds. And I have my fingers curled up so that I can't cut the tips of them off, because that would ruin my day and the demo. I'm turning off my quinoa. It's not bubbling anymore, it's just sitting there. So, turn off the heat, and I'm just going to let it sit for a little while. got all our hardy vegetables, our winter vegetables, and our bell pepper in the pan. And now we're gonna go with the softer vegetables. So the vegetables that take longer to cook, we put in first. And then the softer, quicker cooking vegetables, we put in last. So the next thing I'm going to put in is green beans. Because I like my green beans well cooked. Because if you don't cook them a lot, then they get squeaky on your teeth. And I just personally don't like that. So I cook the squeak out of my green beans. So I'm just going to cut these probably in half because they're not that long. So I'm just going to run my knife through them one time and then throw them in the pan. Nothing fancy. And then I've already pre-washed my vegetables and I let them sit for a while to dry. With a stir fry, you want your vegetables to be dry or else they're going to steam. And we're trying to stir fry them, not steam them. And hello to everyone who's viewing at the moment. Alright, so we're starting to get some nice colors in our pan. Next thing to go in is the broccoli. So, I have a whole head of broccoli here, or a half of a head of broccoli, it looks like. And I'm just going to cut between the places where it branches off, so I get whole florets, or florets, I'm not sure how you're really supposed to say that. And, so I'm just cutting between where the broccoli branches. And these are too big for me, personally. So I'm just going to cut off some more of the stem and then cut the florets in half. And this is a decent size. That's not going to take too long to cook. And it's not going to be too big when you try to eat it. Okay, so I'm going to stir my vegetables now. And I'm just knocking my carrots out. All right. I'm almost to the point where I need to add a little bit more oil. My vegetables have used up all the oil that I put in there to start with. So I put 2 tablespoons of oil on the recipe. I only put 1 in so far because I knew I was going to need to add more later. So if your pan is getting dry and your vegetables are starting to stick, especially your sweet potato, go ahead and add some more oil to the pan. Alright, so now that the broccoli is pretty much in there, the next thing I'm going to put in is the asparagus. Now, I also put on the list cherry tomatoes and optional meat. If you're doing shrimp and your shrimp is frozen and or raw, go ahead and put the shrimp in now. It should be dry. Like I said, all the vegetables and everything you put in a stir fry should be dry when you put it in so it doesn't steam. Alright. asparagus. Let's talk asparagus. So this is fresh asparagus. It came like this in the bunch. And how you want to prepare it is you want to snap it. Ooh, this is not snapping. Let me get a better one. Okay. So you bend it until it snaps. And this asparagus just is not working for me. It's if you have asparagus that is not as fresh as it could be, like this apparently is not very fresh asparagus, then it won't snap, but it's supposed to snap at some point. And then the part closest to the root, after it snaps, you throw that part away and you keep the top. And the reason why you snap it instead of cut it is because if you cut it, you might not cut off all the woody part of it. And you'll end up with really tough, chewy pieces of asparagus in your mouth, and it's very unpleasant. And then you'll come away saying, oh, I don't like asparagus, when really your asparagus just wasn't prepared properly. All right, so these are snapping. So I don't know, the first few pieces I picked up did not snap. But these are snapping just fine now. Except for this one. And once you get them all snapped, we're just going to cut them into short sticks like we did the green beans, about the same size as those. And put them in the pot. So okay. So I'm just going to line them up and cut them in half. Throw them in. I'm going to add a little bit more oil to my vegetables. And then continue snapping asparagus. Oh, that was beautiful. I just snapped a whole bunch at one time. Okay. All right, so if you are using some pulled poultry, like leftover turkey from Thanksgiving, which is coming up, or if you are using rotisserie chicken or already cooked strips of beef, you can add that now. If you're using cherry tomatoes, you can add that now and let that stuff heat through. All we're doing is waiting for the broccoli to cook and the green beans to get non-squeaky. And while we're waiting on that, let's get the flavor in there. So for flavor, I'm using pesto. And be careful with pesto. It does have a decent amount of sodium. So a quarter cup of pesto, which I've used for this recipe, has 560 milligrams of sodium. Now, thankfully, this is, we're going to get more than one serving out of this. So that quarter cup, no one's going to eat a quarter cup of pesto unless you just sit here and eat the whole recipe of vegetables, which I would not recommend. So I did get a measuring cup, but I guess I'm not going to use it. So that's about a quarter cup of pesto. Okay. And then I'm just going to add to that 1 cup of broth. So and the broth also has sodium in it. So, you know, there's no need to add salt to this recipe. If you find yourself needing more salt on this recipe, you have a really high salt tolerance. All right, and so I'm just going to mix the pesto in with the broth and then pour it over the vegetables and let that reduce. All right. Okay. So it's going to reduce down and it's going to coat the vegetables with the pesto and the chicken broth. And we're almost done. The last step that I have on my list is to cut up the green parts of the scallions so that we can use that as a garnish. So while the liquid is cooking off, let's chop up these scallion greens real quick. Okay. And you can cut them as big or as small as you would like them. All right. And now we're ready to serve pretty much. So this is a pretty quick demo. In 20 minutes, we've got a whole dinner. If you're adding the meats, you've already added them by now. If they're fully cooked, you added them at the end. If they're raw, like the shrimp, you added them a little bit earlier, and they should be done by now. Shrimp only takes about 5 minutes to cook. Okay. So I'm going to take my quinoa and fluff it now that it's had a chance to rest and absorb all of the liquid. So I'm just fluffing it with the fork. And I'm going to put it on my platter here. So I'll put the quinoa down first. And then I'll put the stir fry on top. Now this is more than one serving. I'm not saying that someone should eat this much. But this is something that you could put on the table and people can serve themselves from. If you wanted to have a nice presentation. All right. Mm. It's a little bit messy, but it's delicious. Let me make it pretty. Okay. And there's our stir fry with quinoa. And we're done. Dinner is served. All right. So yes, the vegetables can be crunchy if you so choose, or they can be. I mean, if you cook them till they're mushy, you're cooking out a lot of the nutrients like vitamin C, for example, is a heat sensitive nutrient. So you can destroy it if you cook it too long. But with the stir fry, I mean, it's kind of hard to do that. You would end up, because you're cooking with high heat and low fat, you would end up burning your vegetables before you got to the point where they would be mushy. So, um, with a stir fry, by kind of by definition, almost you're gonna end up with some crunch in your vegetables. So, um, so that's it. I'm gonna eat this platter of, not the whole platter, again, not one serving. Um, but I'm going to eat some of this, and I'm excited to do so. So let me do a quick outro so I can eat this. And so today we made pesto stir fry. You can make a stir fry with almost any flavor that you want, any sauce. You just, put the sauce on the vegetables after you cook them. And it's a diabetes friendly and hypertension friendly meal. It's appropriate for the DASH diet and the Diabetes Prevention Program dietary recommendations. And yeah, so enjoy. Hit the subscribe and the bell icon to be notified of the next video. I will say that I'm going to be taking the month of December off, so there will be no live videos next month. And when I come back in January, we're probably going to be doing a whole new thing. So stay tuned for the changes that we make if coming in the new year. All right. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time. Bye.